Welcome back to Smart Start Radio, everybody. We are so excited you have joined us for another outstanding episode. And today we have a super special one coming. We spoke to Megan Henshall, who is an absolute visionary and a leader in creating authentic, elevated event experiences focused on neuroaccessibility. And if you haven't heard the term, we will be defining that very shortly here. So I think that we should just jump right into it. How about you, Yiming?
Let's go.
So Megan, why don't we start off by talking about what you used to do and what you're doing now?
Yeah. First of all, I love you too. Thank you so much for having me. Big fan of Smart Radio. And I'm always delighted to spend time with y'all. So historically, my role at Google was strategic lead for the global events team. In October of last year, we just launched a new team, like building a sort of a new capability, refocusing experience design on the whole of corporate life. So now I'm leading strategy, partnership, engagement for workplace experience. So still very much curating human experience, bringing people together, thinking about how we can make experience better across the workday, as well as events, as well as right? But I think we're leveraging a lot of what we've learned over the last 4 years in the events world, and we're applying that to something broader and a bit of a meatier, challenging opportunity space. So it's been really fun. We're in startup mode, but it's been such a cool journey.
Awesome. This is super exciting because we can kind of talk about both events and creating a better workplace and things like that. So that is just fantastic. It's actually very timely that you're joining us right now. So thank you. So for those of you who do not know the name Megan Henshall, she is a big proponent of the term neuroinclusivity. So Megan, would you break that down a little bit for us?
Neuroinclusion, it's a relatively new term in the industry, but it is basically a practice that is born out of acknowledging and honoring the fact that there is neurodiversity in the world. Neurodiversity is just different cognitive functioning types. We are all neurodiverse. Some people are neurotypical, some people are neurodivergent, which means they have something that is a cognitive functioning style that is different from what is quote unquote the norm or mainstream way. But these are folks like those with ADHD, those with autism, those with OCD, dyslexia, different certain chronic mental health conditions are considered neurodivergences. We're talking about, 25% plus of the global population. And those numbers and rates are growing every day. But, this is about all of us. Neuroinclusion is about, again, honoring, respecting, and incorporating this knowledge into the way we design events, the way that we design the workplace, the way that we design all experiences for people, because we know that a large portion of people have different needs and different strengths and different finitudes. So again, just a practice that honors neurodiversity.
I love it. Yeah, I think that it's just, it's about neurodivergence refers to the fact that there is no problem with having a different sort of cognitive functioning process. It truly is nothing more than a difference, right? And neuroaccessibility refers to the idea that the world needs to be designed with that difference in mind, So when it comes to designing events in particular, what are some of the, would you say, like top hits for creating or incorporating neuroinclusion into?
Yeah, so we've done some pretty extensive research on events specifically, but all of these things, as we've learned over the last couple of years, absolutely translate to most other communal experiences, whether you're at a stadium or whether you're in the workplace. But there are sort of 5 common challenges for folks who identify as neurodivergent in some way. Noise, so cacophonous environments. There are a lot of sensory processing differences amongst neurodivergent communities. So loud environments, flashing lights, crowds, a lack of preparation and predictability. So I think a lot of what we've heard from the communities that we work with and listen to and have learned from is that even just having even priming the audience and sort of giving them the necessary information to mitigate their own risks is really a form of inclusive practice. And it's such a kindness, and it's low hanging fruit, for the record, very easy to do. And we've also heard lack of breaks is one of the number one things. Like, we are not robots. We are not machines. And even though, the overarching narrative is that we should only care about productivity and efficiency, we actually can't be our most productive and engaged selves unless we rest. And so having adequate breaks and opportunities for regulation and restoration is absolutely critical for neurodivergent communities, certainly, but really for all of us.
So how did you become this superstar in neuroaccessibility? Because you have done so much, and you have like truly done pivotal work in how events are designed and how we run events. So would you talk a little bit about your background and your journey in the accessibility sphere?
The journey has been an interesting one because I came to this practice from both a professional place and a personal place. So back in 2021, we started this broad research project that ultimately led to the building of an innovation community called the Experience Institute at Google. And a lot of what we were seeing were these trends around neurodivergence, right? People who were saying, like, I don't feel a sense of belonging. I don't feel cared for. I actually feel, like I'm being asked for too much in these environments, and that people don't see me. Here are my challenges. And we were just seeing themes and patterns all over the place. About the same time, my son received a diagnosis for autism. And like we already sort of knew that he wasn't hitting developmental milestones and that there were some challenges that we hadn't noticed in our godchildren, for example, or other kids that were around. But then all of a sudden I had this very personal stake in all the things that I was hearing professionally. And so I have this kid who has been just like illuminating through the process of like teaching me what he needs and how to advocate for him. And all of these things simultaneously were getting incorporated into my practice at work. And they were having these really positive benefits on the communities that we designed for and people. And then about 9 months later, I got my own autism diagnosis at 41 years old. And all of a sudden, everything made sense. I wondered for such a long time why I didn't get the playbook that everyone else received. They understood all these rules that I had never been taught. I would come home from facilitating events and be in bed for 3 days and nonverbal because I was so burnt out and overexhausted, and in just a complete autistic meltdown. And I never had the language for it. I never understood why I didn't, quote unquote, have the stamina that everybody else had. Now I know why. So, the journey to this place of understanding what neurodiversity and neuroinclusion is has been both professional and personal, but I have to tell you, it has completely changed the way I see my job, the way I see other people, the way I see the role of an event professional or an experience designer in the world. I think this part of what we do is revolutionary and it's so needed right now.
Yeah, totally. So some background about me actually and my relationship with Megan is that I have ADHD and I'm pretty open about it because I think that we should be. So, just like standing on my pedestal right now, like being open about this kind of thing for me is about, making a difference and that like everyone should feel that like they have every right to be as open as they want to be. But anyway, I received my ADHD diagnosis when I was 21 years old. I was in college. It's pretty typical for a woman to be diagnosed later in life, as Megan was too with her autism diagnosis. And my diagnosis was honestly just illuminating. Like Megan, it made everything make sense. And when I first interviewed Megan, it was a couple years after I'd received my ADHD diagnosis. And she said to me that essentially I have the ability to see the world in ways that are not typical and I should look at it as a superpower. And that really like I was already, happy that like I had received that diagnosis because it really did illuminate things for me. But Megan framing it that way made a world of difference. So yeah, this topic is very near and dear to my heart. And I'm really glad that you brought that up, Megan.
How have things been since then with your journey self-advocating?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, like I love to self-advocate. I hope that people feel comfortable advocating for themselves in the world. But I mean, like, essentially, like, my experience at events is different as well, especially, like, walking around a trade show floor. That gets so overstimulating sometimes. I exhaust a lot faster than a neurotypical person would, right? So I need to, like, implement certain accommodations for myself or, like, know about what accommodations are available and take advantage of it. Like, if there is a quiet room, I use it. And the fact that there are quiet rooms in events now, and then that's kind of the standard, is just the most incredible thing. So I'm really impressed with what the events world has been doing.
I have a quick question. Are you at all concerned about, like, I know we're rolling back DEI stuff across the board, and I was kind of I'm doing a different thing on this, but I just kind of want to get your thoughts on that. Like, are you at all worried about that for all of this specifically? Because I feel like this is a part of that, and it's very likely that will be part of what happens when things do get rolling more in terms of like rollbacks and stuff. Is that an issue for you or a concern?
I hate what's happening. Deeply saddened by what's happening, but I'm not deterred, nor am I concerned that these things aren't still of the utmost importance. I think what we're seeing is really like punitive behavior from people who can't quantify the value of something with data on a spreadsheet, or who just have a personal issue with this sort of work or the way that it's spoken about, right? But the work is more important than ever. The impact of the work is more important than ever. You cannot, with any study, any data, disprove the importance of diversity for business outcomes, for revenue, for innovation, for solving big problems in the world. Where that happens is where we honor diversity and where we have diversity of thought at the table. Hard stop. Where we have diversity, we have to nurture it, and we have to honor it, and we have to design for it, and we have to make sure people can meet their potential, their maximum potential, regardless of their identities, their capabilities, their strengths, or their challenges, right? So this work is not going away. We may temporarily use slightly different language, but I'm not scared, nor am I concerned that they're going to do permanent damage to this sort of work and this movement. And the paradigm is here to stay. I'm a big believer. So I'm like, sort of bring it on. And it's in moments like this where, I'm like, okay, we'll come up with different words. We'll create more durable narratives for why this matters in the world.
Like a code phrase?
We know it's true, right?
Yeah.
So it's fine. Take the word equity. I don't really care. Ultimately, we're still going to do the work. And we're going to figure out a way to make the work matter even more so they can't come at us again later.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. Beautifully said.
So I kind of always wonder, like, when people are thinking about this topic and they use it in events, they try to incorporate this into how they craft events, how can they do it in a way that doesn't seem like they're just, we're doing it to seem like we're doing and not because we actually want to do it? So in your opinion and experience, how can events be really do it without making it seem like they're like making people happy just for the sake of their
client satisfaction scores?
Yeah. I mean, I think there are two things that I see happening a lot in the events industry that immediately signal to me like this is performative, and they don't actually care about practice and implementation. They just are checking a box because they don't want to get called out or have negative PR. And one of those things is asking marginalized people or disabled people to come and speak at your event and not offering to pay them. And fully cover travel and expenses and accommodate them. So I will, be super transparent. There have been a number of event industry associations who've asked myself or NEU Project consultants to come speak at their events, would not cover accommodations and supports for them, i.e. like a shoulder night of hotel so that they could recover before they get back on a plane and go to the airport where they have panic attacks, right? And then like give them exposure. Disabled people don't need exposure. They need revenue opportunities. And you're asking for them, their lived experience for your content that's selling tickets to your event. So that is, sorry to get on my high horse on that.
No, you're saying important things.
So maddening to me. And I've like literally refused to work with some people because, it's just gross. Like, can we not? And the second thing is putting sort of like DE&I or inclusion proclamations in pre-registration comms or in marketing taglines, but then you get to the event and there's no accessibility concierge, there's no resilient space, there's nowhere for people to go. there are no support mechanisms actually in place at the event. And so, it's just words on paper, which doesn't amount to much. So those are the two big things I see in the events industry. And again, that can very easily translate to any other type of experience design, or venue or place. It happens a lot. And honestly, I think this is why we're seeing so much backlash on DE&I. A lot of people have been using these words to do really performative things that don't move the needle or have real impact for a very long time. And so it's time to shift that narrative.
So what are the things that do have an impact? You brought up an accessibility concierge, you brought up resilient spaces. Would you break down a little bit more like what those things are and if there are other things? Yeah, and I'm going to tack on to the end of that question. You also brought up the NEU Project, which if you're listening, that's spelled NEU. You can find it online, super easy if you just Google NEU Project. It is a comprehensive resource for designing truly holistically accessible events for planners. And Megan, if you want to add anything about the NEU Project, please feel free.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the plug. So that's actually a project that started out of the Experience Institute at Google. And in 2024, we fully divested to a nonprofit. And so now our mission is outside of the corporate context, and it's more focused on different dimensions of experience design, not just events, but retail and fan experience and workplace experience. And we only hire neurodivergent people. I don't know if y'all knew this, but neurodivergent folks are more underemployed than folks with physical disabilities. I think 4 times more likely to be under or unemployed. Like, it's wild.
Why is that?
I think it's because neurodivergent folks have a really hard time fitting into professional molds. And there's so many old, dusty norms inside of corporate context that you see a lot of neurodivergent people doing gig work or, like sort of freelancing. And that's hard to keep sort of sustainable income in that place sometimes. So I see a lot of creatives who are neurodivergent who like don't fit a typical like professional or corporate mold. And then there are also people with real disabilities who like can't go into an office or can't travel, So I think that's why, at least some of the major reasons, but we only hire neurodivergent people. And the whole mission is to fund supports and services across experience and to create real job opportunities for neurodivergent people. But there's a whole checklist. There's a whole guide on the NEU Project website. So www.theneuproject.com that has a bunch of practical tips. Those resources will always stay free for the events industry because that's where we started and we have such a heart for events. There's also a practical checklist that sort of walks you through pre-event, during event, post-event, like things you can do, and they're weighted because there's a real acknowledgement that we're all up against constraints, whether they be like cultural, budget, venue constraints, right? So there are things where you can sort of assess trade-offs and do the most impactful things. But I will say priming your audience, giving them as much information up front as possible, makes a huge difference. Having trained support staff on site, huge difference. Resilient spaces, giving people a place to go and regulate, restore, have a beat so they don't end up in the bathroom, which is what's happening today. Huge impact. And then having sensory supports on site that signal like, hey, you belong here and we care. Some of these things are hard and we may not be able to control that they're hard, but we're going to do everything we can to make them easier for you. So those are some of the most impactful things, but there's a laundry list on the website. And again, all those resources are free. What's ours are yours. Please use them. And let us know how they're going because we always love to hear from folks who are implementing what feedback they're getting from their communities.
Yes. And this work is so crucial. And the fact that the NEU Project offers this like really like easy to digest concepts that some people might find like really difficult. It's like, well, I want to make my events accessible, but where do I start? Like, I have no idea. The NEU Project breaks it down so easily. I've read through it. It is fantastic. And yeah, it's just so crucial. So if we could talk sort of about the stakes, like if events are not designed with neuroinclusivity in mind. And we sort of address this, but in general, like how is it going to affect, the attendee? How is it going to affect the business? So on and so forth.
Yeah. I mean, I think bottom line, when we're inviting people into a space, whether that's for an event or as an employee, or they bought a ticket to come see a show, we have a commitment to them to make sure that that environment allows them to fully engage and fully participate and contribute, right? Like our objectives are for them to show up, have an excellent time, and then want to come back again, right? It doesn't matter how well designed the event or experience may be. It doesn't matter if you have like name brand talent. If that environment is harmful to them, if they leave broken and so depleted of energy, they're not coming back. So it is a real social contract that we have between ourselves and the attendee, and we have to hold up our end of the bargain if we expect them to hold up theirs. And that is what this work is about. People can't meet their potential and engage unless they're included, unless they're cared for, unless we do the bare minimum, which really is meeting their needs, their basic human needs. And that's not just food, water, and cool content, right? It's giving them rest, giving them opportunities to, cognitively reset. It's meaningful connection. It's all of these things. And that really is at the heart of this practice. That's what it's about.
One thing, I went on a trip, I think it was to Calgary a little while ago, and they did a recent facelift of the facility, and they were very intentional in all of every aspect of that location, really thought about people who need quiet time, people who need space. And it was really interesting to see that they really thought about it. So I was kind of curious, in your opinion, what are some areas or spots or cities that you think really strive to do that, to really they think about it? They really, if they've made new venues, new halls, whatever, places that you feel have really gone above and beyond to make sure people feel like I do belong in this space.
That's a good question, Amy.
It is a really good question. I mean, there are a lot of cities who are, have reached out to the NEU Project to incorporate things like this into their convention centers, for example. This is happening. The movement is catching on. I will say I sit on a board for the city of Toronto, and I think Canada is blowing care and inclusion. They're leaps and bounds ahead of us for both inclusion and I think sustainability in a lot of ways. But I think, there are a lot of small towns who are getting, autism certifications, for example, in the United States. There are a lot of hotels, like Marriott made a public commitment around neuroinclusion it was either late 2023, early 2024 in partnership with the NEU Project. So stuff is happening. You just have to look, you just have to seek it out and ask questions about, what their values are as it relates to these things. Just in case you're listening and you want to dig into these resources more, we will put links to the NEU Project and to the autism destination, certified autism destination. Is that the correct word?
I think it's certified the Sunflower Program, I believe.
Oh, I haven't heard of that.
That's the disabilities program.
Oh, yeah.
And that's actually out of the UK.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Cool.
But that's a great resource for people who may be neurodivergent or who are loved ones or caretakers. But it's a lanyard that basically says, I have an invisible disability. Yeah. A lot of people who are neurodivergent use that, but it helps you navigate airports, for example, or retail environments. It can get you support there, but that's a great program as well. If you just look up certified autism friendly, it gives you, there are a couple different certification programs, but it's a good way to find the various certifications and who has them. I know with certified autism destinations, it requires something like 80% of I don't know, for a convention center, for example, 80% of the staff to have completed training. And there are certain pillars in place about how the venue should operate in order to, be fully inclusive and accessible for people with
neurodivergence is. And there have even been like cities and towns that have earned this designation. So it is absolutely outstanding. The world is doing wonderful work. We really are moving in a beautiful direction.
I agree. And so I think back to, I mean, your question about the stuff that's happening politically right now and in the US predominantly, there's more good happening than this like illusion that we're taking a step backwards. People are going to quietly do the good work. They're going to quietly do the heart-centered work. More and more and more. If anything, I think this is actually motivating people to like go out and find ways to support people who are vulnerable or marginalized. I'm really optimistic.
That makes me happy.
That makes me happy.
Yeah. Well, at least that's how I feel. I'm like, I'm not going down without a fight.
Yes, absolutely. And that is why you're a rock star. We need people like that, right? We need fighters. We need people who are going to be advocates and take steps to actually make positive change in people's lives. Well, I'm here. You come sit next to me if that's you too, because I think we need community and we need to know that we're not in it alone. And sometimes it is very lonely work, especially when the pervasive narrative is that it's going away or that we're going to, undo the work that has been going on for decades. Like reach out, find allies in this work, reach out to me. We need each other.
Since our audience is mainly people who host events and throw events, and I know one shoe size does not fit all. So for people who, want to be an ally, want to be supportive, want to be there, but don't necessarily have the knowledge or tools to like jump in or how to, orchestrate said thing, either people that they can speak to or websites they can visit that can kind of like make them just a little bit more understanding of what they are trying to accomplish, even if they may not have the knowledge or experience to help them on their way to that.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I would say there are no experts in this space. I am learning every day. The language is evolving every day. The brain is complicated. It's like the ocean. Like there's so much going on that we
the ocean is scary.
And so like nobody is an expert on this. There are neuroscientists, but like there's a lot we don't understand, and we're going to continue to learn. And this paradigm is going to continue to evolve. So if anybody tells you they're an expert, like run in the other direction.
You are not an expert. You need to leave.
I mean, it's so silly to think that you can be an expert on the human condition. Like that's not a thing.
Right.
You can be philosophical about it, and you can be curious, and like that's all you need. That is all you need to get started. You have to have
no more but explorers of the human condition.
Preach. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. That was so awesome.
Curiosity and having an imagination about how you might be kinder and do better at what you can control in the world. That is it. That's all you need, baby. That's it. And then find people to listen to and talk to. So I think where I started, even before I had my own diagnosis, is I was like, if I'm going to be an effective parent to this incredibly special kid, I should probably talk to some adults who are autistic and see how their parents did well and maybe how they could have done better. And so I started reaching out to people who were vocal about their experiences online. That's how I met a lot of the consultants that ultimately ended up helping write the NEU Project. And I just listened and I learned so much in every conversation. And then every conversation would spark more questions. And then I was so like intellectually selfish in that process. At first, it wasn't even about necessarily what I could do. It was about what I didn't know and trying to figure out what that was. I mean, we're talking about things that are invisible. We have to make them visible first. So that's where I encourage everyone to start, is like, be curious and talk to people and listen with an open heart, and you will uncover ways that you can uniquely contribute to this movement with who you are and what you're good at. And you don't need a playbook for that, and you don't need an expert to tell you that. Like, you just have to figure it out for yourself. It's a creative act. It really is. Like, it's an act of love, and it's a creative process. So That's not like prescriptive at all, but it is what I would.
Well, mic drop.
Yeah, right. Speaking of a playbook, Megan, there is this amazing, beautiful book that just came out that you might have been, somewhat involved in, called The Belonging Playbook.
Yeah.
Would you talk about that a little bit? I wish I had it with me right now. I have it in the office, actually. Naomi, who was on our podcast last October talking about belonging, I ran into her at IMEX and she gave me a signed copy, and I have it in the office, and I was trying to find you. But you were so busy. I think like both of us were so busy. We're just like running around the IMEX floor. But next time.
Yeah,
I'll bring the book back. I do want you to sign it.
I came home and I was like, what happened? It was
right.
Blacked out. But
tell us about the Belonging Playbook.
The Belonging Playbook came about as a result of some of the focus grouping and individual conversations we had through the forming of the NEU Project, really, and some of the other Experience Institute work. But it kept coming up in conversations, and predominantly in the context of like, I feel a lack of belonging. I don't feel included. I don't feel seen. I don't feel represented. And so we were like, okay, pump the brakes. Like, we really need to dig into this. This is a thing. And so we really started to reach out to people who had done research in this space. And we found some really fun co-conspirators to try to dig into this and figure it out. And ultimately, we created a framework called the Wheel of Belonging. It ended up being like a communal art installation that traveled the world, that helped us collect information about how people get to a place of belonging. So they got to like physically loom on this big loom.
You choose kind of your pillars of belonging, right? And you get a string. And like some of it is high and I'm short. So you like throw it up and like weave it through this kind of like dome type thing. It's so fun. So if you haven't done it, you should.
Yeah, there's like you end up with this really beautiful, colorful piece of art, living art that everyone created together. But it tells a story. It tells a story of what are these common themes and patterns that help people get to a sense of belonging, and then ultimately that informed the playbook. Lots of research, lots of partnership, but it exists in the world now, which is an amazing thing, and it's practical. It actually helps event professionals and experienced designers understand how to curate these touch points and how to design them into the experiences that they create. I personally have a theory that, a lot of the problems systemically, culturally, societally, politically that we're seeing right now are because people don't feel loved and they don't feel like they belong anywhere. And so they're just attaching themselves to anywhere that feels like a community, like a tribe, like a place that they can be. And sometimes those places aren't healthy, and sometimes they're really toxic, and sometimes they look like love, but they aren't. I'm going to get emotional. But I think this is a real way that, especially those of us who are bringing people together, that we might be able to solve for that, like one event at a time, one group of people at a time. So check out the Belonging Playbook. I think it's a beautiful resource. And Naomi's team at Storycraft Lab are some of the most heart-centered, empathetic, kind people. I think they're one of the best agencies in the business, and I stand them for life. So yeah, check it out.
Would you talk a little bit about the work that you've done at Google XI Days, and like what are some of the key takeaways when it comes to like specific things in event design, but also, like overall like lessons about designing for neuroinclusion?
Yeah. So XI Days was an event, a very experimental event that we did a couple of years into the Experience Institute situation, like building that community, playing around, prototyping, researching. And so XI Days was the first time we brought that global community together in person. And we did it at one of our beautiful spaces, Google offices in New York, Pier 57. And we took over the whole pier, and we had, I think, almost 20 different activations over the course of the 2 days. We brought in a bunch of speakers to do lightning talks to talk about their good work in the world. We had a museum concept where people could just sort of like freely roam around into these different activations and try them and learn on their own terms, on their own time. So we didn't really even have an agenda, which was, considered anarchist in the events industry, but we didn't know what was going to happen, right? Like we threw sort of all the spaghetti at the wall because we wanted to see how people engaged with this very different way of experiencing an event. And like they loved it. Some people have said it changed their life, which to me is just mind blowing, but we made some forever friends and we really explored a bunch of different things. But a couple of things we learned from that is like, we're really underutilizing sensory pathways at our events. Like we mostly over-index on audio and visual, and the audio stuff is like predominantly harmful. It's like loud music assaulting your ear holes, right? You can't escape it. It's not thoughtful and it's not intentional. It's actually like just noise. And then we have a bunch of slides and that's largely it. Like we're not using scent. We're not using like tactile, kinesthetic things. We're not inviting people to do art and create and play. And we did a lot of that at XI Days and people just loved it. We had a signature scent there. We also had a universe of colors brought to life where people could like engage with these different color worlds that had custom soundtracks. But we were experimenting with the idea that when you engage senses in multiple ways, you actually help people retain information and it becomes like this very lasting memory for them that you can recall with that same scent with, right. We also did a bunch of neuroinclusive things there and all of them were incredibly helpful. We prototyped a couple different types of resilient spaces for the first time at that event. Long story short, it was our way of bringing some of the things we thought would work into real life and inviting engage with them and see what we learned from it. And a lot of those things have now become common practice for our event teams at Google. And I think have informed a lot of where we're headed future. So that was a really fun event. And I'm so grateful we got to do it.
That's so awesome. Yeah, I love that. Creativity, allowing people to create, like it also enables you to sort of like rest and take a step back from the somewhat overwhelming nature that an event can have. Loud music is the absolute worst thing for me. Like when I walk into like a theater setup and like the CEO is about to come on and do a keynote and it's all awesome, then they just have like blaring music. I have to like take a few deep breaths and like get myself a seat. But yeah, so I don't know. There are just like so many innovations that your team is making that, or like, well, your former team, because now you're doing amazing stuff in the workplace, right? But event planners across the board, one of my favorite things that I've seen recently is these coloring boards at events. I know there was one at ASAE in Cleveland, and they had basically just like this giant coloring board with markers that people could, pick one up, color in something however much they wanted. And at the end of the event, you have this like totally or almost totally colored in piece that everyone at the conference had the opportunity to contribute to if they wanted to, which is just like, it's so sweet. It's so like kind. And there's so much heart in that, like we're just exploring the human condition.
Yeah, I love that. And like, how easy is that? That's like right? Going back to stuff you did as a kid, like a coloring book.
Yeah. The power of play, that's something that we've written about in the past, the power of play.
I think this idea that innovation has to be like invention. It has to be something new in order to be innovative is fake news. Like innovation, totally, an act of reclamation. It can be bringing back things that, we've lost or we've forgotten, like coloring is good for you. Right?
It really is.
That's not new. But using that in a new way to connect people and do something really beautiful that's communal, like that's a repurposing and a reclamation of that matters. And so like I get asked about this a lot is like, what made you brave enough to like start to innovate? And, I get called a pioneer, which you said at the time, which just blows my mind because I'm like, I'm just walking around bumping into things all the time.
That's so awesome, though. That is pioneering, allowing yourself to move and to discover and then create. You know, that's pioneering.
I'm using that. I'm stealing that.
I love that. Yeah, that's really good.
My best friend at work, Ryan, and my partner in crime for Experience Institute calls it flailing forward or flailure. Like you just flail.
I love that.
Oh my God. That's going on a poster board at work.
Flailure.
It is a good mantra though, because sometimes stumbling around in the dark, you find a door to open and it illuminates the right thing to do. You know, like you have to do that. But innovation does not mean like inventing something new or coming up with something novel. It might just mean nobody's paying attention to that anymore. And that matters. Let's like bring that back in a modern way. Boom.
Yes.
You know,
I love it. So we are kind of at a beautiful point to ask our trademark question, which is, what is in your toolbox? Essentially, what is something that you feel has propelled you on this journey, or a major takeaway that you want listeners to walk away from this episode with? What's in your toolbox?
Okay, I'll give two, I think, like relatively woo-woo answers, and then
Love
one
it.
very practical.
We love woo-woo on this show.
Eaming and I do have some crystals around the office.
Woo-woo quite frequently.
Is that tiger's eye?
Yes.
Ah, love it.
It's a good one. That's a good one. So I try every minute of every day to be as deeply human as I can, because I find that showing up vulnerably, authentically, and like just saying the thing instead of beating around the bush is the fastest way to get to the answer, the solution, the right person, whatever we're after, right? Like, be human. Don't let anybody take that away from you, regardless of like what environment you're in, what context, what's going on. Like you deserve to be there in all of your glory. So that I think has served me well, and I haven't always shown up that way. I mean, I started in corporate America at 22, and I was in like an inside sales organization where there were 6 women out of like 60 something people. So like that's hard fought. But once I realized like, oh, like when I'm myself, I actually have more to contribute. And then I think, you know, I try to always operate from a place of love first. You can have love in work. You can have love in dealing with the person that you work with that is the most challenging and that you may not like very much. You can still, there's still love in that. And that is very woo-woo, but it has served me well. Like, you know, you can have love in all things.
I don't think it's too woo-woo. I think it's very insightful, and like, yeah, if we all operate with more love, you know, the world becomes a more loving place. It's transformative.
It just takes one person having one slightly more loving interaction every day for there to be a real domino effect there.
Yes. Now you're going to make me tear up.
I show up to a lot of calls where like the other person thought they were there to argue or fight with me. And I'm like, no, I don't know. My arms are open. I'm here for a hug. Like I'm here to understand how I can help you. You showed up to a fight, but like misunderstood the assignment, ma'am. Like, not why we're here. And I think that's a really good way to approach the hardest things. It's like, you don't have to fight your way through. There's a lot of that language going around. I don't know if y'all have noticed, but like, there's a lot of like, we're fighting, we're battling. There's a lot of like war analogy happening in work right now. And like, it's not that serious. It's not that serious. And then the third thing, very practical, find good friends and allies. That is the quickest way towards success. Find people that inspire you. Find people that are doing things you think you can't do, but would love to. Like, and ask them to sit with you and listen and learn from them. And those will lead to partnerships and collaborations. And the next thing you know, you're doing really cool stuff together. Because here's what I've learned about, especially working in the corporate context. You can mess up a lot of stuff by yourself, but you can't get anything done without other people. Hard stop. Like you just can't. Or at least it's a lot harder than it should be. And it's not going to be as meaningful because it's just you going, yay, I did it, So yeah, find friends and have fun. Like even the hard stuff can be fun. Yeah,
completely. I love it. Do you guys see why I idolize this Megan Henshall?
Yeah, Megan. Thank you
awesome.
For allowing Sarah to keep asking you to come on our show until you finally caved.
Life has been just.
I totally get it. No, it's okay. I so desperately wanted you on this show because I just knew that you would be so fantastic, which you have been. It's going to be an amazing episode. I'm so excited.
Oh, thank you. Well, it has been a delight. This has been a great way to sort of close down my Friday. So thank you for having me.
Good.
And it was lovely to chat with you both.
So yeah, that was she's definitely like a firecracker, if there was a word to describe. And I think it's so interesting that she found out her thing when she was in her 40s. Because like I'm near her age. One thing I've thought about a lot is that like there wasn't like a time to be like looked at or diagnosed.
Yeah.
And I never did. And I'm pretty sure I have something because it's just
right. Well, that's the thing is like a lot of women in particular, especially, are very, very underdiagnosed for neurodivergences. Like, with autism in Megan's case, with ADHD in my case, a lot of people get diagnosed with autism and ADHD when they're a kid, right?
Yeah.
When they're like 5 to 7 or whatever. But I didn't get diagnosed with ADHD until I was 21.
Right.
And that's only because I was like, well, you know what? I don't feel normal. Like, I don't feel like this world works for me in certain ways. And I reached out and I got tested and, the results showed. And it's so interesting because, a lot of these things you don't really know. And the only way that you know is like the way that I've been moving through the world. It doesn't fill me in the way that people say it should. Right. So getting, like, as I said in the episode, getting my diagnosis was illuminating, absolutely illuminating. And it made my life so much better because now I know how to get what I need and what I need.
Yeah. So I really hope that this conversation, I know if you read our stuff on our website, you definitely have heard us talk about this at great length, but I'd really love it. We have someone who can, really speak on it, who's in the trenches or has been in the trenches working in it. I think it makes it more real and more human and just genuinely more able to better to give it a face versus a concept. Because I feel like that's where people jump up like, oh, it's like, it's woke, it's blah. Right. No, it's people who need help.
Yes. Yeah. It's like, it's innovation. It's creating, like, taking strides towards building a better world and a better experience for everyone. What are the stakes? The stakes are that you are going to have happier attendees who are going to come back. You're going to have better year-over-year increases.
Your ROI will go up.
Yeah, and you're going to make a positive difference in people's lives. I mean, we're all about people in the events industry, right? This is about people.
Right.
This is about making a better world for people. So, yeah, Megan is just an absolute innovative leader, and we are so happy that we got to have her on the show. She's so awesome. We really hope that you enjoyed this episode. We loved having this conversation. And thank you so much for joining us today. We will see you next month.
Yes. And make sure you check us out on Instagram, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, our website, smartmeetings.com, and our magazine, which is also lovely and beautiful with all the photos and wonderful content that Sarah and I and all our editors create under the leadership of JT Long, our fearless leader. But yes, thank you again for joining us today. And please subscribe to us.
Please subscribe. Because you do belong here. We really mean that.
We do.
You belong here.
We're not just saying that. We do mean it. So
join us in this wonderful journey.
See you guys next time. You've been listening to Smart Start Radio. a Smart Meetings production. Interested in being our next guest? Connect with us at editor@smartmeetings.com.